This is the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. Great to have you with me here at this podcast, as I always say, where we look at our times through the lens of faith and leadership, character, and history. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been inspired by a story, moved by a story, almost wept at a certain story? You told others about it. You were encouraged and inspired and shaped by it. You wanted to live out its values and its virtues. It just meant the world to you. And have you ever maybe heard someone else tell that story, maybe seeing it depicted in a movie or read it in a book, and have it just trashed, have it just slimed, have it just urinated on? Well, I have to tell you that that's going on for me right now. And it's about the story of the Guinness family and brewery, a story I have loved, a story I have written a leading book about, a story I have lectured about all over the world and to some of the world's big companies, a story that inspires me, a story because I've had a chance to tell it, has actually prompted the founding of companies, moved companies and businesses towards social action. I mean, I see the power of this story all the time. And so I'm grieved by a current telling of this story in a mini series on Netflix. Going to tell you a little bit about it. Going to tell you a little bit about the truth. Going to tell you a little bit about my connection to this story. Right now on Netflix, there is a miniseries called House of Guinness. It purports to tell the story of the Guinness family. Now, a screen that pops up at the beginning of every episode says, "This fiction is inspired by true stories." But I want you to think about what that might mean if it was said of your story. Let's say somebody wants to tell your story, but they say, we're going to fictionalize your story. We're going to take your name. We're going to take your look. We're going to take your times. We're going to take your family. And we're going to take your basic profession and the way that you are. But we're going to fictionize all of it, make it fiction, and we are going to trash you in that process. That is what is going on with the House of Guinness. Now, I need to say quickly to give kudos where kudos are deserved. It's beautifully shot. It does a beautiful job of depicting Dublin at the time period in which they're presenting, late 1800s. The acting is wonderful. It's well-financed. By the way, it's created and written by Stephen Knight. I should call him Sir Stephen Knight because he was knighted last year, a British television writer, producer. He actually wrote one of my favorite movies called Amazing Grace, 2006, all about the abolition movement and William Wilberforce and John Newton, who is the man who wrote Amazing Grace, etc. Beautiful story. And he wrote that. So clearly Stephen Knight has the ability to write about faith in sensitive ways, write about history, write, for all I know, about religion that's not his. You might know him better as the creator of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Very well known, very popular, very esteemed in England. That's why he was knighted last year. But he has, and those who produced this miniseries with him, they have produced a stunning trashing of a noble story, and it saddens me. I'll give you a few examples. Almost every member of the Guinness family, and this is not a depiction of the time of the founding. This is a number of generations later. We're into the grandchildren and great-grandchildren by this point, even great-great-grandchildren before it's over. Almost every Guinness member is small and immoral and cowardly and crassly political. It's as though the goal is to paint them as terrible people. The lead, almost the lead actor in the entire miniseries as a Guinness is an actor playing Arthur Guinness. This is not the founder. This would be a great-grandson, etc. He is presented as being gay. Let me just give this for an example. Well, almost a third of the narrative is devoted to presenting all the issues related to him being gay, him looking for lovers, him having to be rescued by the family, people having to be bought off so they don't betray the fact that he's gay, creating a marriage that is presented as a sham marriage. It wasn't. et cetera, et cetera. Him having a political office, having to hide who he is morally, preachers conspiring against him, and so on. And here's the bottom line. You will find this online. Other people will say it. It's not just that you don't put this down just to Stephen Mansfield's views of homosexuality. The fact is there's no evidence for this. Zero. And yet it's a huge portion of the 8 episodes of this miniseries, House of Guinness. Huge portion. It's almost the main theme. Others are drunks. Others are liars. They hate being Guinnesses. They hate their family. Even the social good that they do is always being portrayed as their hands are forced and they're trying to buy off the populace and they're trying to increase their markets. Never does it come from a Christian compassion. Never does it come from concern for the people. Never is there a moment where you're inspired by their benevolence. Now, there are a few beautiful moments in this regard. For example, when they do finally announce that they're giving pensions to the workers, they're cheered and there's great celebration. And, old age meant poverty for the most part in Ireland. So this is a huge thing and it's movingly presented. So is one Guinness's experience in the rural parts of Ireland where there's great poverty and good comes from it. But for the most part, there's not anybody in the Guinness family you want to be. They're constantly spoken of as nasty and duplicitous and immoral and conspiring and small and resenting who they are and resenting their legacy and finding everybody who's come before them in the Guinness line as hypocrites, as small characters. And I want to tell you that the story is beautiful. I want to tell you that there's inspiration in it. I want to tell you that there's a higher version of this story. And I want to start this way. I want to tell you let me start in 1928. You would have had benefits as an employee that are stunning, even by modern standards. Even Amazon, even Apple do not approach this level of benefits. Consider this. Employees at the Guinness brewery would have had on-site medical services. They would have had full dental, 1928. They would have had massage services. Now, they would have had me right there. There would have been educational benefits. I have spoken to people whose family lines were changed because Guinness paid for intelligent sons and daughters of Guinness workers to go to Trinity College Dublin, to go to Oxford, to go to some of the better universities, to get an education even at the primary level and elevate the family entirely. Educational benefits. The company provided a company-funded pension. Think about that. That was very new. You see this alluded to in the House of Guinness, but it is treated as a cynical cover for, the misdealings of the Guinness family. They immediately paid 20% higher salaries. They paid for funeral expenses of the workers. There was a savings and loan in the company so that workers could, if they worked hard and saved and qualified for the loans, they could own their own home, something unheard of for most people in Ireland at the time. There were lectures and entertainment. There were sports facilities and leagues. There were reading rooms. There were libraries. There was a home health service. Listen to this. Because Guinness was in downtown Dublin, and it was a bit of a city, a heavy city with, not the best air. Coal was burned primarily and so on. And Guinness realized, their medical advisor said, hey, if you really want to help these people, get them out in the country once in a while. So every year, Guinness paid for every worker to go with his family out into the country. And they even had a dating service for the single workers so that they would be accompanied by an appropriate woman when they went out into the country. So Guinness is paying each worker to go out in the country for a year, breathe the air, look at the water, pick the flowers, have a picnic. And if you're single, they're going to make sure that you have an appropriate accompaniment for that day. Now, pretty considerate. All of that in 1928. And by the way, in addition to all that, every worker got 2 pints of Guinness each day. Now, I want to say that's 1928. None of this, by the way, is alluded to. Well, very little of it is alluded to in House of Guinness in the miniseries. And when such things are presented in the miniseries, they are presented as though somehow the Guinness family's arms got twisted. Somehow they had to show up and do certain things. Somehow they were required to do these things. There's one moment that I thought was fairly noble, and that is that they tell some older workers, finally, we're going to provide a pension. And you can't believe the look on their face and the way they cheer. It's the first time it's ever happened. Old age meant poverty for most people in Ireland. And remember that this is all just after the potato famine, horrible starvation in Ireland, terrible. The rural areas are just poverty-ridden, and cemeteries with dead family members. I mean, it's horrible. And this is, by the way, is beautifully portrayed in the miniseries. I want to give all the kudos that I can. But what I'm saying is by 1928, Guinness, because it had been influenced by some people who urged them towards social care, and they were very wealthy, they were able to provide their workers all the benefits that I've just read, not to neglect to mention that they had already begun to address poverty in Ireland. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. So this is what happened. And I just tell you, I'm not going to go into the whole thing. I'm not going to do everything that I do in my speech. I'm not going to tell you everything in the book, but let me just give you a quick flyover. Arthur Guinness founded the Guinness Brewery on the rivers of the Liffey River in Dublin in 1759. Famously, he signed a 9,000-year lease. It's one of the great oddities of world business history. He signed a 9,000-year lease so he could build his brewery at St. James Gate in Ireland. It was a magnificent thing. And he specialized in porter beer. It's called that because the porters, the guys who moved all the luggage and baggage around the train stations of England, loved it. So it got to be called, kind of a slang, porter beer. It was dark. It was nutritious. Maybe you've had a Guinness. My point in all of this is not really whether you drank Guinness beer or not. Because, by the way, I think I've said many times on this podcast, I do drink alcohol, but I don't really have a taste for beer. I also don't have a taste for coffee. So I drink almost no beer and never drank coffee. And my point is not to get people to drink. Drink if you want to drink responsibly, enjoy it. I enjoy my Manhattan from time to time, and margarita and what have you, and a glass of wine with dinner. But my point is not about the alcohol primarily. Now, what really shapes the Guinness story is that Arthur Guinness, the founder and the guy whose image you see on the signs at the pubs and so on, especially if you've been in England, was influenced by John Wesley. He heard John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, when John Wesley went to Dublin and preached. And Wesley was unique. His Methodist movement was founded largely socially out of reaching people in debtors' prisons, which was a hellacious feature of his era of English history. But he went and said something to the wealthier classes, to the middle class, upper middle class, to the manufacturers, to the aristocracy, that for many of them who were Christians, who were believers, and who were willing to be influenced by this truth, really gave them a reason for their wealth, gave them a sense of Christian mission for what they were doing in business. He said, make all you can, save all you can, give all you can to the glory of God. So make money. Make it righteously, make it morally, take care of people along the way, and use that money. Save as much as you can, right? Don't be ridiculous and flagrant with it. Profligate would be the old word. Then give all you can to the glory of God. Well, this, simple though it sounds to us today, gave people like Arthur Guinness a sense of mission about their role in business. And I'm not going to bore you with all of the details right here, spoken really rapidly, but they began to make a massive difference in social impact in Ireland. They immediately began to pay, once Arthur Guinness was taken with this, began to pay their workers 20% more than the average brewery workers in Ireland. They built hospitals. Arthur Guinness fought dueling, which was a problem at that time. By the way, he was a Protestant, but argued for Catholic rights in his era. He started orphanages, all kinds of things. And then, of course, his heirs picked up that mantle, picked up that torch, so to speak, and went further. They built all kinds of facilities, actually started a thing eventually called the Ivy Trust, IVEAGH. The Guinnesses are the Lord's Ivy. That's their aristocratic name. And so there's the Ivy Trust. And there have been years that the Ivy Trust put more money into addressing poverty in Ireland than the Irish National Health or the Irish welfare system. It's pretty amazing. All of this is going on while they're growing the biggest and most powerful and most prosperous brewery in the world. I mean, they're mentioned in Dickens, they were mentioned in political speeches, and it's pretty stunning. in the late 1800s, there was a thing called the Irish potato famine. There was a blight, a disease that entered into potato crops in Ireland, and potato was the main source of food and nutrition for people. And so starvation was horrible. Visitors to Ireland talked about the white skeletons that lined the roads. To watch your child die of starvation is got to be one of the greatest hells you can experience on earth. It happened for thousands and thousands of people. Millions died. People flooded into the cities like Dublin. And that's why the Guinnesses got busy, because they were trying to address all of that. It just goes on and on and on. By the way, for you business heads, in 1886, Guinness went public and did a huge stock offering, and it just produced tremendous wealth. And so they began to do things like restore St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, one of the main icons of the nation, kind of like our national capital here in the U.S. or the Washington Monument or something. Began to pour a lot of money into the Guinness foundations and into poverty and what have you. And they kept their commitment to addressing poverty. One of the stories I very much love is that a Guinness heir, this would have been like a great-great-grandson named Rupert Guinness. He got married and was given by his father £5 million. Now, this is hundreds of millions today. But the next day, having gotten married as a Guinness, that's like getting married as a Kennedy in the United States. I mean, wealthy, high profile, beloved, and everybody endeared to you. The next day, he and his bride moved into basically what we would call a ghetto, a tenement in Dublin, and lived there for a while just to draw attention to the plight of the poor in Dublin. This was the Guinness commitment to poverty and the Guinness commitment to addressing the sufferings of the Irish people. It just went on and on and on and on. There was a doctor who worked for the Guinnesses. His name was Dr. Lumsford. I like him very much. The Guinness board asked, what can we do to address poverty? And they said, look, if you're going to address poverty, you're going to have to address housing. People are living in tenements. They're jammed in, sometimes 30 people in a small little apartment, tiny, tiny little thing. And so they empowered John Lumsden to do a study that led to Guinness tearing down and rebuilding all of the tenements near the brewery. They put these people in other temporary housing. They tore down all the houses. They rebuilt them. They're called the Liberties. To this day, they're some of the hot property for yuppie investors, but they helped relieve poverty. Unbelievable. I don't know of another company that's ever done anything like this. During World War I, for example, and I know I'm moving rapidly, I'm just trying to give you the highlights. During World War I, Guinness continued to pay 50% salary to every man who went to war who had worked on the Guinness factory floor, hired the wives. So many times Guinness families would have more money than they'd ever had before. The wife was working at full salary. The husband was getting half salary. And they guaranteed every man his job when he returned to the brewery after the war. Unbelievable. When has that ever happened before? So it just goes on and on and on. Their combination of innovation and business, along with their devotion to addressing poverty, is simply historic. Now, were there some people who were a little maybe crazy in the Guinness family? Sure. Were there some people who were immoral? I'm sure there were. Were there some people who were greedy? I'm sure there were. But the main Guinness story is one of changing the world, changing nations, changing Ireland. In fact, Guinness decided to use the harp as their symbol because they wanted to champion the case, the cause, the glory of Ireland. This is presented in House of Guinness as some kind of cynical way to win the people and keep riots from happening. But that's not how it happened. They wanted to champion the cause. Now, I could go on and on and on, but at the end of my book, I identify Guinness pillars. I'm going to give them to you quickly now because these are the pillars they built on. I drew these from either speeches the Guinness family made or issues that the board discussed, and I drew these from their minutes. Number one, discern the ways of God for life and business. Prince Albert, the husband of Queen Victoria, said, gentlemen, he was speaking to a room full of men, find out the will of God for your day and generation, and then as quickly as possible, get into line. Find out what God is doing and get into line. And the Guinnesses had a sense that one of the main things God was doing was trying to reach the poor and the suffering, and they gave themselves to it. Number 2, think in terms of generations yet to come. Number 3, whatever else you do, do at least one thing very well. The Guinnesses had tried other ventures, real estate, trains, etc. They'd realized we're called to brew. We're called to address social problems. And it's a beautiful story that I'm leaving behind here, but I tell often, and I love telling about it. They believed in mastering the facts before you act. They were known for deliberating long and acting quickly, and it served them well. They believed in invest in those you would have invest in you. They believed in leaving some on the table, making deals that benefited everybody. It made a difference. And then finally, they believed you cannot make money from people unless you're willing for people to make money from you. Now, my book is called The Search for God and Guinness. I urge you to get it. I rarely take time to sell books here on my podcast because, who I am and what books are available are obvious to anybody who's subscribing to my podcast. But I'm so irritated by this House of Guinness Netflix documentary. I urge you to see it, not because it's good. By the way, be very careful about your children watching it. It's got every kind of weirdness and perversion. But nevertheless, see it if you want to, but make sure you read some of the good books. And I include mine in that, not arrogantly, but just because it tells the story of benevolence, whereas most of the books talk about the family or talk about the brewing. And I think that's all beautiful. And I used those books, but I had access to Guinness family members. I had access to Guinness records. I went to the Guinness brewery and storehouse and archives in Dublin, spent time there in the archives, guided by the archivist to get the facts straight. I already knew a little bit about John Wesley, having a background in Christian history. But I want to urge you, get the book, The Search for God and Guinness. And I want to say something else, and I don't think I've ever said this on my podcast. I give speeches about Guinness as examples for companies, and I've given those speeches literally all over the world. I don't have a lot of time these days to give speeches, but if you've got a company and you're going to gather a good number of people and you want to schedule a speech like this, make contact with us. Contact us through stephenmansfield.tv. You'll see a page there for specifically communicating with us about booking speeches that I make. I'm not promising I can do every one that you might ask for, meaning my entire audience here, but I'm so energized by the good of the Guinness example and so disturbed by the House of Guinness as a distortion of that legacy that I believe every company at its corporate retreats, at its fundraising events, at the Jackson Hole retreat, etc. You understand what I'm saying? You need to have exposure to this, and we would certainly try to make it work for you. Guinness is a powerful story. Go watch the miniseries if you want to, but mainly get to know the story. It's going to be better known in our society in a distorted form because of the miniseries, but you can get the facts, and especially if you are in leadership, especially if you work in benevolence, especially if you lead a company that you want to do good in the world, you need to get The Search for God and Guinness by yours truly.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator in international media. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God and Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.